98% have been slaves. We are letting this slip through our fingers because we've grown lazy, stupid, apathetic, or too trusting of people in power. Wake up. Know the Constitution. What if 48% of the people are right? And we do slip into a Great Depression. I think, honestly, it could be a Great Depression, because the longer you prop something up, the deeper the problem becomes. We showed you earlier this week all the economic and housing stats that are actually worse now than they were in the Great Depression. We probably would have hit a Great Depression at the TARP point. What does it look like today? But if they are right and the economy tanks or even worse, what happens then? What happens when grocery stores either have no food or it's so expensive that no one can afford it? What happens when unemployment and energy prices necessarily skyrocket, to quote the president? Have you ever seen a grocery store when you say a snowstorm is coming or a hurricane is coming? The shelves are wiped out. Shelves are empty. People can laugh at you or at me all they want. I don't care anymore. How many days do people go without food or money before they begin acting erratically? James Carville said civil unrest, if the economy keeps tanking, is imminently possible. I agree with him. He is right, even though he called me a crazy man when I said the same thing over a year ago. When unrest hits home, as it will we be the people of Joplin and take care of ourselves without waiting on the government? Or will we turn on each other, and will we beg the government to do whatever they have to do to save us, take care of us, and inevitably control us? We have to be more free at the state and local level. We have to be more independent. And dare I say it, we have to be more religious, but religious in the way Ben Franklin talked about religion. In 1790, Yale University asked him, "What is the American religion?" And he said, "Here is my creed. I believe in one God, creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we can render to him is doing good to his other children." Gang, that is the American religion. That's it. It's not happenstance that we're the most charitable nation to ever walk the face of the earth. It's our American religion. We have to find that within ourselves and prepare to be that greatest American generation yet again. Tonight, I want you to meet a guy who is, I think, one of the smartest guys out there. You will meet him, and you will be, at first, you'll be like, "Oh no, please make him stop talking because he scares the crap out of me." And then you'll be glad you met him, because I think he's going to help you clarify in your mind what's coming, and possibly it'll give you some ideas on some things that you can do. You'll meet him when we come back. Who sees the world in similar fashion as I do, and in this case, it's good to be. If I'm crazy, it's good to be surrounded by a guy who's crazier than I am. Jim Rogers. He is a legendary investor and author of A Gift to My Children, A Father's Lessons for Life and Investing. Have you always, I mean, you're legendary. To have a sit-down with you, and to be, I mean, unless you're Neil Cavuto, you don't get a chance to sit down with you very often. How long have you been deemed nuts?
Probably for about most of my life, I would suspect, looking back on it, even when I was in high school. I grew up in a very small town in Alabama. Even then, they thought there was something wrong with me.
Right.
And they were probably right.
Right, yeah. Give me a thumbnail sketch of what you see coming.
Well, the United States is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, Glenn. And it's getting worse. It's not getting better. You would think that those clowns in Washington would read one history book and see what happens when countries get into this kind of situation. Nobody ever has gotten out of this kind of situation without a crisis or a semi-crisis. Mm-hmm. Now the crisis or the semi-crisis is coming sooner rather than later. We're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. In the history of the world.
Are they inflating our money intentionally as the only way to get out of this debt?
Of course, that's what they hope to do, is they will cause inflation. I mean, I don't know if they're smart enough to plan this out, but the way it's working, they're going to inflate the currency, cause inflation. Currency will come worth less and less, and we'll pay it off in worthless money.
I talk to people all the time who are at your level, and they say, Glenn, no, you know, it's going to be a controlled inflation. I don't know how you control that. There's no way to control that.
Nobody has ever been able to control inflation. Once inflation starts, then you try to put it down. It gets harder and harder. The longer you wait, the worse it gets.
Right.
It's all, I mean, just read some history books. People think I'm nuts too. I say, just look it up.
I know.
I'm not smart. I just looked it up. Right. You look it up too.
It's really simple. I mean, one of the first things, when they started TARP, a friend of mine who is very well aware of all the situations just said this to me: read all you can about Weimar. And I have. And there came a point where the politicians were, well, where they are now, where they looked at each other and said, okay, if we stop all this stimulus, then we go into a Great Depression, and then the people are going to rise up, and there'll be riots in the streets. And if we don't, there'll be hyperinflation. And they said, yeah, but that's not necessarily guaranteed. That gives us more time. All they're doing is, and they could be of the best intent. I'm not claiming that they are, but they could have the best intent, and they're doing just, let's just have more time to figure something else out.
I don't think any politician has ever brought disaster on knowingly and willingly. It just gets out of control. But Glenn, most politicians are not that smart. That's why they become politicians. The studies show, you know, that the people in America who become the best politicians are the people who excelled at playground. They didn't excel at anything else. Most of them have never had jobs. They don't know how the world works, and it's frightening. It's frightening.
Okay. So tell me about the Middle East, because I think the Middle East is about to be. Would you agree with me that Israel is the keystone of the West? That if that falls in this situation, that just starts to sweep across Europe and destabilizes everything.
Well, if Israel falls, you're certainly going to have chaos in the Middle East. There's no question about that. I don't think you're going to see the Muslims at the gates of Vienna again.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the destabilization, that the whole world, you destabilize Israel, the whole thing, and the West is already on the ropes.
Well, there's no question that you're going to see a lot more social unrest in Europe. You're going to see more social unrest you're going to see more social unrest everywhere, including the United States, I'm afraid.
You believe there will be burning buildings in New York or Los Angeles? I mean, Watts riots kind of stuff?
Don't you?
Yes, I do.
I mean, what's wrong with you? Read your history.
I'm there. It's nice to be with somebody.
Well, I mean, just look it up. This is not complicated stuff. As you may remember in the 30s, you know, remember Cox's Army? They marched on Washington. You had people marching on Washington in the 30s and camping out around the White House because they were really angry and very upset. Now, in the 30s, America was much more disciplined. It's very unlikely, but in this decade, America's not nearly as disciplined as we were in those days. Now everybody expects a free lunch. In the 30s, nobody expected a free lunch. They were willing to work. They were willing to do whatever they could to get money and food. We don't have that nation anymore.
So let me just go tick off a couple of other things here first. Is gas going up because we're printing money, or because OPEC won't produce more?
No, gas is going up in the first place because we're running out of known reserves of oil. The IEA, the International Energy Agencies, are going around the world pleading with people to listen. Known reserves of oil are in decline. And then you have the central bank in the U.S. throwing gasoline onto the fire. So we have shortages that are coming, but then you have Mr. Bernanke down there printing money as fast as he can, and that, of course, leads to inflation. It always has. This is not brain surgery. Just look it up.
How did the Gulf and the BP thing affect the United States and our future on fuel?
Well, it was certainly a disaster what happened. I mean, I'm from Alabama, and I certainly know a lot of people who suffered on the Gulf Coast when all that happened. But the unknown consequence, or the unintended consequence, is now we're not drilling. We're not drilling for oil in a nation which is running out of oil, at least known oil, and we're not drilling.
Have you seen what the regulations are doing now to coal, what they're talking about now, that it's going to make the...
No, everything is going to be much more expensive. They don't seem to understand we're running out of known sources of energy. And unless we do something quickly, very quickly, prices of gasoline and oil are going to go through the roof.
Like what?
Like drill. Like drill. The main thing we need to do is to drill for oil. We've got a lot of oil in the United States, apparently, but nobody can drill for it.
Okay. Well, when we come back, I want to talk a little about some of the things that Jim just said is coming. Now I want to kind of take him to, okay, so what do you do if you're somebody with just a 401k, or you're not a billionaire that can move your money offshore, et cetera, et cetera. And I've asked Jim before we went on the air to come up with a few things, recommendations to parents or to grandparents, to college students. What should you be doing? And also I want to ask him a little bit about what he said. I read that you said that you believe the dollar is over, and it could happen in the next 5 months. He's a spooky dude.
I said it could happen in the next 5 months. I didn't say it was going to happen.
It could happen in the next 5 months. And then I want to talk to him a little bit about food and farmers, and some stats and some ideas on farming that I've never heard anyplace else. Coming up.